Kunlay had always dreamed of owning his own tailoring shop, and for years he meticulously saved every naira from his small corner workspace in front of his uncle's provision store. The cramped space barely accommodated his old Singer sewing machine, and he was tired of hearing his uncle's constant complaints. Tailor, where customers beg for thread, Fitsu Abada for king. The humiliation cut deep. Kunlay yearned for his own space, a big, proper shop where customers would walk in and smell the fresh scent of new fabrics, where he would be addressed respectfully as Master Tailor, instead of hearing dismissive calls like "Oya, come help me fix, zip quick quick." His patience was rewarded when he discovered 3 connected shops available for rent. The moment he laid eyes on the property, his heart raced with excitement. The space was incredibly room than he had ever dared to imagine. The rent was surprisingly cheaper than any single shop he had surveyed in the area, and the location was absolutely perfect, right on the main road, where everyone passed daily. The caretaker was an elderly man with a face weathered like dried pepper, but something about his eagerness struck Kunlay as peculiar. The old man's smile came too icily, too frequently, and his eyes held a strange glint that made Kunlay's skin crawl momentarily. However, the attractive price quickly overwhelmed any lingering doubts. "See as this place they find. If you miss this chance now, your village people go waka oh," the caretaker said with that unsettling grin. Kunlay's heart melted like butter in the sun. The opportunity seemed too good to pass up. Without even attempting to negotiate the already low price, he paid on the spot, grinning like a goat that had just discovered fresh yam peels. The first week after opening was nothing short of magical. Kunlay had transformed the space into a tailor's paradise. He painted the walls in vibrant yellow and blue, creating an atmosphere of warmth and professionalism. He positioned mannequins strategically in front of the shop, dressing them as if they were ready for a Lagos fashion show. To complete the ambiance, he bought a small speaker that played music from morning till night, creating a lively atmosphere that drew customers like honey attracts bees. Business boomed beyond his wildest expectations. His sewing machine danced like a hungry performer, and customers kept streaming in throughout the day. Mothers brought their daughters clothes for upcoming weddings, men requested traditional abathas for Owambi parties, and even some of the neighborhood's most fashionable women, the local slay queens, came to commission dinner gowns. Kunlay was euphoric. For the first time in his life, he felt truly successful. He hired 2 apprentices, Chika and Bodhi, to help with cutting and ironing. Life was sweeter than palm wine, and his future looked brighter than the morning sun. But even in those early golden days, something about the shop didn't feel entirely normal. The unsettling incidents began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Whenever Kunlay locked the shop door at night, he would hear peculiar sounds emanating from within, a dull scraping sound, as if someone was dragging scissors across wooden tables or moving fabric around in the darkness. Initially, he dismissed these sounds as the work of rats. "Rat day disturb my shop," he muttered, purchasing rat poison and setting traps strategically around the workspace. But morning after morning, the traps remained untouched. No dead rats were found. Yet the mysterious sounds continued with increasing frequency. There were mornings when he entered the shop early and felt an inexplicable chill in the air, as if someone had left a deep freezer open all night. The cold was unnatural, bone-penetrating, making him shiver despite Lagos's typically warm climate. "Ah, maybe nah, because I no chop bread yesterday night. Hunger day, 'cause cold for body," he would rationalize, shaking his head and trying to warm himself up. But the rational explanations were becoming harder to maintain. One evening, while alone in the shop packing customers' completed garments, Kunlay turned around to lock the main wardrobe where he stored the most expensive items. Suddenly, he felt a strange shadow brush past his side, not a visual shadow, but something that seemed to displace the very air around him. He spun around quickly, his heart hammering, but the shop was completely empty. "Ha! Kunlay, stop you now afraid of shadows. Ordinary tailor way want make money day fear breeze." He laughed nervously, but the laughter sounded hollow and unconvincing even to his own ears. The first real shock arrived 2 days later, hitting Kunlay like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. He had just finished sewing a breathtakingly beautiful pink lace gown for Madame Yukina, one of his most valued VIP customers. The gown was a masterpiece, intricate beadwork, perfect stitching, an elegant design that had taken him 3 days to complete. He had ironed it to perfection, placed it carefully on a premium hanger, and even sprayed a little expensive perfume to ensure it smelled divine. The gown represented not just craftsmanship, but his growing reputation as a quality tailor. But when he arrived the next morning, the gown had vanished, completely disappeared as if it had never existed. Panic seized him immediately. He tore the shop apart with frantic energy, opened every drawer, searched under tables, checked outside in the compound, looked in every possible hiding place, but found nothing. It was as if the gown had grown legs and strolled out into the night. "Chica," he shouted when his apprentice arrived. "You carry that pink gown, go your house." Chica's eyes widened in genuine confusion. "I beg, I never even see the gown since yesterday." "Maybe you never see 'em. See me package the clothes yesterday. You want kill me. That woman go finish me if she see her gown." The young apprentice swore on his mother's life that he knew nothing about the missing garment. His obvious sincerity only deepened the mystery in Kunlay's growing dread. Madame Ukina was not a woman anyone wanted to cross. She was known throughout the neighborhood for her fierce temper and her ability to destroy reputations with a few well-placed words. When she arrived to collect her gown, Kunlay tried to maintain a professional smile, but his expression looked more like someone attending a funeral. "Where is my clothes?" she demanded, tapping her long, decorated fingernails on the table with the rhythm of an approaching storm. "Ah, madam, you see, something happened. Kunlay stammered, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "What happened? Did you eat my clothes?" she barked, her voice rising to a pitch that made nearby customers turn and stare. Kunlay wanted to vanish into thin air. He started mumbling something incoherent about rats, about possibly misplacing the garment, and promised desperately to sew another one before the week ended. Madame Yukina's laughter was harsh and cold, like a snake's warning hiss. "Kunlay, if I don't see my gown in 3 days, I will show you pepper that no soup can cook," she declared before storming out, leaving behind a trail of fury and the promise of consequences that made Kunlay's blood run cold. Unfortunately, the mysterious disappearance was not an isolated incident. The same inexplicable vanishing act happened again, with another customer's expensive abaya, then with a delicate lace blouse, and then with an intricately embroidered kaftan. Disturbing pattern began to emerge that filled Kunlay with increasing dread. The more beautiful and expensive the fabric, the higher the likelihood it would disappear overnight. It was as if some invisible entity had developed an exquisite taste for only the finest materials. Cheap cotton shirts and plain trousers remained untouched, gathering dust in their designated spots. But let a wealthy customer bring luxury ancora, expensive lace, or premium silk by the next morning, the item would have vanished without a trace. Kunlay's mind was running at maximum speed, churning through possibilities like a machine overheating. What if there was a sophisticated thief operating in the building? What if someone had somehow obtained a spare key to his shop? What if this thought made his blood freeze? Witchcraft was involved. Desperate to solve the mystery, he started implementing increasingly elaborate security measures. He locked the most valuable clothes in a heavy iron trunk, wrapping each garment in black nylon bags like contraband. He even wrote customers' names on paper and attached them to each fabric to prevent any possible confusion. But his efforts proved futile. The next morning, he arrived to find the trunk mysteriously opened, not broken, not damaged, just open, as if unlocked by someone with the key. 2 of the most expensive outfits had vanished again. Kunlay stood frozen for a full minute, his mouth hanging open like a fish gasping for air. "Blood of Jesus. This one, Dan Pass, ordinary village people matter," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Kunlay collapsed onto the floor in despair. Never in his life had he felt so close to madness. He couldn't comprehend what was happening in his own shop anymore. Customer clothes were disappearing like jollof rice at a crowded wedding, quickly and without explanation. Every time he thought he had solved the mystery, something even stranger would occur. He could no longer even suspect his apprentices because, deep down, he knew they lacked both the intelligence and courage to execute such clean, silent operations. Bode was too lazy to even sweep properly. He had once fallen asleep while standing and holding a pressing iron, and Chica looked like someone who would confess to crimes he didn't commit under the slightest pressure. Still, when the boys arrived for work, Kunlay couldn't help but vent his frustration. "Chica Bode, I don't understand this thing again. You sure say una no day live inside film, because I day see film episodes now." The boys, who were equally terrified by the strange occurrences, began offering their own theories. Maybe somebody did do juju for this shop, they suggested nervously. Kunlay rolled his eyes in exasperation. Juju, for this small tailor shop, which kind poverty juju be that? He snapped back privately. The possibility was beginning to seem less ridiculous. Refusing to surrender his dream without a fight, Kunlay decided to investigate the entire neighborhood. Perhaps a rival tailor was sabotaging him, or maybe someone harbored jealousy about his sudden success. He spent days asking questions, but the responses he received were deeply troubling. People would listen to his complaints, then shake their heads with knowing looks, as if they possessed information they were reluctant to share. Some would glance at each other meaningfully before offering vague, unsatisfying responses. Others would quickly change the subject or claim they knew nothing about the problems plaguing his shop. Even more disturbing was his landlord's reaction. When Kunlay complained about the mysterious disappearances, the older man simply laughed, not with humor, but with a sound that held dark understanding. "Ah, young man, don't worry. You will get used to this place," the landlord said with an enigmatic smile. "Get used to what, Oga landlord?" Kunlay pressed, but the man had already walked away, leaving the question hanging in the air like smoke. The lack of straight answers only intensified Kunlay's growing paranoia and fear. As word of the mysterious disappearances spread through the neighborhood grapevine, Kunlay began losing customers at an alarming rate. His reputation, which he had worked so hard to build, was crumbling faster than a house built on weak foundation. One particularly angry customer, whose expensive agbada had vanished just days before his daughter's wedding, came to the shop shouting threats that echoed throughout the street. "Kunlay, if I don't see my cloth, I will tie your life inside this bag." Desperate to salvage what remained of his reputation, Kunlay begged the man, offering full refunds and even promising to replace the garment at no charge. But damage to his credibility was spreading like wildfire through the community. The more he tried to fix the problem, the worse it became. Customers who had once praised his work to their friends were now warning others to stay away from the cursed tailor shop, where clothes disappear into thin air. Kunlay watched helplessly as his dream business transformed into a nightmare that seemed to have no end. Far beyond the world Kunlay could see or imagine, in a realm where shadows dance like restless spirits and time moves differently than in the land of the living, another kind of neighborhood meeting was taking place. This was not your typical landlord association or community gathering. This was a conference of the Deda assembly of souls who had once walked the earth but now existed in the spaces between worlds. In a smoky, dimly lit hall that resembled the remains of an abandoned social club, several ghostly figures sat around a large table, arguing with the passion and volume of Lagos bus conductors fighting over change. Their voices rose and fell like drums in a heated ceremony, debating matters of utmost importance to their supernatural community. "I said it is my turn to wear that blue kaftan," declared a man with a bowed head and a translucent body. He had been a local wrestling champion in his village before death claimed him, at the young age of 35. "Shut up, you wore the red senator last week to that wedding by the abandoned church," replied another ghost, this one a woman with a broken neck who had died in a car accident decades earlier. "Me, I never attend any party since February. Today, nah, my day," insisted a third spirit from the corner. A ghostly woman with bright red lipstick and an elaborate head wrap snapped her ethereal fingers with authority. "All of you should calm down. I am wearing the next clothes. Period. I have a baby dedication tomorrow to attend. I cannot go naked. I need to represent." The room erupted in supernatural chaos. The ghostly assembly was more organized than any living person might imagine. These were not mindless spirits wandering aimlessly through the afterlife. They were sophisticated supernatural beings with social calendars, fashion preferences, and a complex hierarchy that governed their otherworldly activities. "Ah, Madame Felicia, please just stop this, your selfishness. Do you think you are the only one that likes enjoyment?" protested a young female ghost who had died in her 20s. "Even me, I have a crush waiting for me at that nightclub. I need to slay." They all began talking simultaneously, like traders in the busiest Lagos market. If you didn't know better, you would assume they were living people arguing over clothing in a boutique. But these were souls who had once roamed the earth. Now, trapped in a state between worlds, their situation was tragic and unique. Years ago, The old cemetery where they had been buried was demolished to make way for urban development. Their bodies had been disturbed, some coffins left to rot underground, while others were carelessly relocated. Their spirits, confused and displaced, had refused to move on to whatever lay beyond. When a person dies and their body is properly laid to rest in consecrated ground, their spirit usually finds peace and transitions to the afterlife. But when burial sites are disturbed without proper spiritual protocols, the dead sometimes remain earthbound, caught between the world of the living and the realm of eternal rest. These particular ghosts had retained their love for social gatherings, fashion, and nightlife, the same pleasures they had enjoyed when alive. Death had claimed their bodies, but not their desire for style and entertainment. To understand the full scope of Kunlay's supernatural predicament, one must travel back in time to learn the dark history of the land beneath his shop. Many years before Kunlay's tailor shop existed, before the building was even constructed, that plot of earth had served as the neighborhood's primary burial ground. The cemetery was ancient, so old that even the oldest residents could barely remember when it was established. Local legends spoke of burials dating back over a century, with some graves so old that the wooden markers had long since rotted away and been forgotten. As the city grew and land became more valuable, developers began eyeing the cemetery for redevelopment. The redevelopment process was handled carelessly and without respect for the dead. Some bodies were exhumed and relocated, but many were simply built over, their coffins left to decay beneath the foundation of new structures. The spiritual protocols that should have been followed, prayers, cleansing rituals, proper notification to families, were completely ignored in the rush to capitalize on prime real estate. The first person brave enough to open a business on the cursed land had been Mama Sissy, an elderly woman who had started a small restaurant. Initially, everything seemed normal, but soon bags of rice and bowls of stew began disappearing overnight. Mama Sissy, thinking the thefts were the work of rats, bought traps and poison. But one night, she heard the unmistakable sounds of plates clanging and spoons hitting pots coming from her locked restaurant. When she gathered the courage to peer through the window, she witnessed something that would haunt her for the rest of her days: a group of translucent figures sitting around tables, eating amala and licking their fingers. With palm oil dripping from their ethereal faces like living people enjoying a hearty meal, Mama Sissy fainted on the spot. The next morning, she locked the restaurant permanently and never returned, abandoning her investment and warning anyone who would listen. Even in the afterlife, hunger day catch dead body, people laughed at her story, dismissing her as a superstitious old woman who had probably been drinking palm wine. Nobody dared rent that property again until Kunlay came along. Desperate for an affordable space and willing to ignore the warnings, back in their supernatural meeting hall, the ghostly debate was reaching fever pitch. The spirit who had been a tailor during his lifetime was meticulously examining Kunlay's missing clothes as if preparing garments for a heavenly runway show. "See this Abatha way, just finish. Chai, this guy get hand. You cannot get this quality unless you meet a pro," the ghost tailor said, admiring the intricate stitching and perfect hemlines. Another ghost rolled his ethereal eyes in annoyance. "I beg, leave that cloth for me now. You know, say I day tire to wear native. Ordinary ghost way no day, pay rent day, collect VIP clothes every time." Suddenly, there was a thunderous bang that shook the ghostly meeting hall. All the spirits turned and froze in supernatural fear. Their leader had arrived. Babakuro was an ancient spirit who had been buried over 100 years ago, yet he still carried himself with the bearing of a military commander. His voice was deep and commanding, carrying the authority of someone who had seen the rise and fall of kingdoms. "All of you, shut your mouth." Babakuro's voice boomed through the ethereal space. "Do you know how hard it is to get fresh clothes in the land of the living? Kunlay is, oh, you are tailor now, whether he likes it or not. If you want clothes, you will wait for your turn. No more fighting." The room fell into respectful silence as Babakuro continued his authoritative address. "Remember when Mama Sissy ran away because of missing food? We suffered for months, wearing the same burial clothes to every social event. We cannot afford to lose Kunlay too. He is giving us what we need to shine at parties and maintain our dignity in the afterlife. So behave yourselves." The other ghosts mumbled and nodded reluctantly, like children being scolded by a strict parent. "Fine, but I still want that pink lace," Madame Felicia grumbled under her breath. "We will share it," Babakuro replied firmly. "You will wear it until 10 p.m. Then Lola will take over for the midnight party at the abandoned building downtown. By this time, Kunlay had reached his absolute breaking point. He wasn't going to sit passively and let invisible forces drag him into bankruptcy and madness. If these mysterious clothes thieves thought they could destroy his livelihood without consequences, they were about to meet the warrior version of Kunlay. He was determined to catch the culprits red-handed, even if it meant spending an entire night in the shop where the mannequins seemed to watch him with their lifeless plastic eyes that somehow suggested they knew all his deepest secrets. That evening, he sent Chica and Bode home early, pretending everything was normal. "Una fit go house small. I go iron this fabric for tomorrow," he lied, trying to sound casual, but his heart was beating like a generator about to explode from overuse. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind Lagos's busy skyline, Kunlay locked all the doors, checked every window twice, and switched off the lights. He dragged a small wooden stool to the far corner of the shop, positioning himself where he could observe everything while remaining hidden in shadow. To prepare for whatever supernatural encounter awaited him, he armed himself with 3 weapons: a long wooden stick from the back of his shop, a bottle of anointing oil he had borrowed from his church-going neighbor, and as a last resort a Bible he hadn't opened in years but hoped still retained some spiritual power. Sitting in the darkness, Kunlay prayed silently with more desperation than he had ever felt. "Father, Lord, if I survive tonight, I promise I go so clothed for pastor free of charge for 1 whole year." He tried to stay calm and maintain his courage, but as the clock struck 11 p.m., the atmosphere in the shop began to change dramatically. The air grew noticeably colder, as if someone had opened an industrial freezer door directly behind him. Kunlay rubbed his arms vigorously and whispered, "How Harmatan reach inside shop Abig, who put a cipher here?" Then he heard it, click, click, click. His eyes widened in absolute terror as one of his sewing machines began operating on its own accord. The needle bounced up and down rhythmically, as if invisible hands were expertly guiding fabric through the mechanism. The machine worked with a precision and speed that surpassed even Kunlay's professional capabilities. Kunlay's body froze completely. He wanted to stand and run, but his knees refused to obey his brain's frantic commands. His mind screamed, "Run, Kunlay, run!" But his legs seemed to respond, "Sit down, let us die here together." Before he could process what was happening, one of the mannequins near the window began to move. This wasn't imagination or the result of wind. He could see it clearly. The mannequin's head tilted at an unnatural angle, and its plastic eyes seemed to track his movement across the room. Then another mannequin raised its stiff arm, as if adjusting an invisible sleeve on a garment only it could see. Kunlay's jaw dropped open so wide he thought his face might split. "Jesus Christ, who sent me this work? Who begged me to be tailor?" Suddenly, a wooden hanger near the wardrobe clattered to the floor. Kunlay watched in hypnotized horror as a bright red lace gown belonging to one of his regular customers lifted itself off the ground and began to float gracefully through the air, as if worn by an invisible model inspecting her reflection. So this NA ghost fashion parade, Kunlay gasped, grabbing the Bible like a weapon he had no idea how to use. The supernatural fashion show was just beginning. More clothes began moving with increasingly elaborate choreography. Fabrics danced through the air as if swaying to music only they could hear. One expensive agbada even spread its sleeves wide, as if attempting to take flight around the room. Kunlay's fear transformed into shock, then into a bizarre form of disbelief. He blinked hard, pinched his arm until it hurt, but this was no dream. This was happening in his shop, in real time, before his very eyes. "Chinnik, who I offend? My tailor work dawn becomes spirit boutique." The supernatural cold breeze grew stronger, and he could hear faint laughter echoing from what seemed like another dimension. But this wasn't human laughter. It sounded like voices coming from apparel.